This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9. English news as it should be.
A very good morning. You're watching News 9. I'm Karthik Malhotra. We've got a power-packed show ahead of ourselves here on Morning Brief at 9. First up, the big story coming in this morning, coming right from the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, saying that the U.S. government has allowed India a 30-day waiver to buy Russian oil. That's the big story we are tracking for you on the show this morning. Also on the show, we will bring to you what the U.S. Pentagon says about Anthropic. The Pentagon has delisted Anthropic, calling it a supply chain risk. And of course, also on the show, we will bring to you how Zelensky could potentially be to the rescue in the Iran war. US seeks Ukraine's help to fight the Shahid drones. All this and more on this edition of Morning Brief at 9. And this is Morning Brief at 9. First up, let's bring you all the headlines we're tracking for you this Friday morning. US grants India a 30-day waiver to purchase Russian oil amid West Asia tensions, allowing transactions until April 3rd to stabilize global energy markets. State-run gas distributor GAIL India assesses gas supply cuts after Petronet LNG declares force majeure as West Asia conflict disrupts Qatar LNG shipments and Strait of Hormuz transit. Joint operations by the United States and Israel enter their 7th day, with Tel Aviv launching fresh strikes on Tehran, targeting what it calls key regime infrastructure. US President Donald Trump says American military operations have severely weakened Iran, claiming 24 vessels were destroyed and urging Iranian diplomats to defect and help rebuild the country. Sri Lanka begins offloading 208 crew members from an Iranian vessel a day after a US submarine sank the warship IRIS Dena in nearby waters, killing at least 87 sailors. NATO chief Mark Rutte says a missile that flew toward Turkey during the Iran conflict does not justify invoking the alliance's Article 5 collective defense clause. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky offers Kyiv expertise against Iran's Shahid drones in exchange for West Asian leaders pressurizing Russia for a one-month Ukraine ceasefire. The US Defense Department designates Anthropic and its AI models a supply chain risk, prompting the firm to vow a legal challenge in growing clash between Washington and Silicon Valley. And Indian airlines cancel a total of 281 international flights as escalating West Asia conflict forces airspace closures. Government activates passenger help desk and monitors situation closely. The big story coming in this morning. In a big relief, India has received a temporary boost to its crucial and critical energy supplies after the United States granted a short-term waiver allowing Indian refiners to purchase Russian oil. Now, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announced a 30-day exemption offering relief to Indian refiners amid tightening sanctions on Moscow and rising geopolitical tensions in West Asia. Now, in a statement, the U.S. Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control said it had issued a Russia-related license authorizing the delivery and sale of Russian crude oil and petroleum products loaded on vessels as of March 5th to India. The authorization will remain valid until the end of the day on April 3rd, 2026, and also covers transactions involving vessels that may have been blocked under various sanctions regimes. Washington said the move is aimed at stabilizing global energy markets as geopolitical tensions in West Asia continue to disrupt oil flows and increase volatility. Now, calling India an essential partner, Besant said the waiver is a deliberately short-term step designated to allow oil that is already stranded at sea to reach global markets without providing major financial benefit to Russia. The development, remember, comes months after the Trump administration had imposed sanctions on Russian oil giants Lukoil and Rosneft over Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. Now, India's imports of Russian crude had dropped to about 1.1 million barrels per day in the month of Jan, the lowest since November of 2022, before rebounding to roughly 30% of total imports in the month of February. Meanwhile, India's energy supply chain is facing fresh pressure as the escalating conflict in West Asia begins to disrupt liquefied natural gas shipments. State-run gas distributor GAIL India said it is assessing whether it may have to curb gas supplies to customers after forcing a force majeure notice from long-term supplier Petronet LNG. The notice comes as vessel movement in the Gulf region faces severe constraints amid the widening conflict involving the United States, Israel and Iran. According to GAIL LNG, allocations from Petronet were reduced to zero starting March 4th, although the company said the overall impact of the disruption cannot yet be quantified. The crisis has disrupted fuel shipments from the Gulf and affected India's LNG imports from key supplier Qatar LNG. Industry sources say transit through the strategic Strait of Hormuz, a crucial route for global oil and gas shipments, has slowed sharply after several vessels in the region were reportedly hit during the conflict. Now, Petronet LNG said its tankers were unable to reach the LNG loading terminal at the Ras Laffan industrial city in Qatar, prompting the force majeure declaration to buyers including GAIL as well as Indian Oil Corporation. Now, India imported 27 million metric tons of LNG in the 2024-2025 fiscal year, roughly half of its total gas consumption, with a large share coming from Qatar. Meanwhile, ONGC Petro Additions Limited said it is running its Dahej gas cracker at drastically reduced capacity due to falling gas and feedstock supplies, warning that the disruption could ripple through downstream petrochemical plants. Now, US President Donald Trump said Iran is now reaching out to the United States as the military campaign intensifies in the region. Speaking on Thursday, Trump said Tehran has been trying to open talks with Washington amid ongoing US and Israeli strikes. The president claimed the US military operation has severely weakened Iran's capabilities, with 24 ships lost in just 3 days. He called on Iranian diplomats to seek asylum and help build what he described as a better future for the country.
The United States military, together with the wonderful Israeli partners, continues to totally demolish the enemy far ahead of schedule and at levels that people have never seen before, actually. We're destroying more of Iran's missiles and drone capability every single hour, knocking them out like nobody thought was possible. As soon as they set off a missile, within 4 minutes, the launcher gets hit. They don't know what's happening. But we have the greatest military anywhere in the world. Their Navy is gone. 24 ships in 3 days. That's a lot of ships. And I'm once again calling on all members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the military and the police, to lay down their arms. They're only going to be killed. And now is the time to stand up for the Iranian people and help take back your country. You're going to have a chance after all these years to take back your country. Accept immunity. We'll give you immunity. And we'll be giving you really the right side of history, because that's what it is.
Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth warned on Thursday that Iran would be making a mistake if it believed Washington could not sustain the war in West Asia. He, in fact, said the United States had only just begun its campaign. Hexet also insisted that U.S. military objectives in Iran have not expanded even after President Donald Trump suggested Washington should have a role in selecting Iran's next leader. And Sri Lanka has begun offloading 208 crew members from a second Iranian vessel off its coast. The move comes a day after a U.S. submarine sank the Iranian warship IRIS Dena in the same region, killing at least 87 sailors and leaving several others missing. Now, President Aruna Kumara Daisinke said Colombo decided to assist the vessel after consultations with all parties. The crew being evacuated include officers, cadets and sailors, while a small number will remain on board to help the Sri Lankan Navy move the ship to the eastern port of Trincomalee. The incident highlights how the Iran conflict is now spilling into the wider Indian Ocean. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has reportedly offered Kyiv's expertise to help West Asian countries defend themselves against Iranian drone attacks. Zelensky said Ukraine has developed unique expertise in intercepting the Shahed drones after 4 years of fighting Russia, which has repeatedly used the Iranian-made weapons. He offered to send Ukrainian specialists to help counter the drones now being deployed across Gulf countries, but only if regional leaders convince Russian President Vladimir Putin to agree to a one-month ceasefire in the war in Ukraine. And NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said the alliance remains committed to backing Ukraine even as tensions rise in West Asia. Rutte highlighted Ukraine's growing role in supplying allies with drone and anti-drone technology systems that are now helping counter Iranian drones in the region.
What I'm sensing and hearing from my conversations with many leaders in Europe, in the United States, Canada, is an approach where we say it has to be end-end. It is and make sure that as allies we enable what the Americans are doing in the Middle East, in Iran, against Iran, and not Iran, I should say, but the regime, because this is not, I think, a fight with Iran or the Iranian people, it is with the regime. And at the same time, making sure that Ukraine has what it needs to stay strong in the fight now, but also hopefully past the peace deal to be as strong as possible going forward.
And the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte also said a missile that headed towards Turkey during the Iran conflict on Wednesday does not currently justify invoking the alliance's Article 5. Now, Article 5 states that an attack on one NATO member is considered an attack on all. Rutte said the alliance remains vigilant but stressed that no one is discussing activating the clause at this stage. He also said NATO supports the United States in its strikes on Iran, warning Tehran had been moving closer to becoming a threat to Europe. Listening to the NATO chief again.
Well, Article 5, I think, is not in order here. Nobody's talking about Article 5. And the most important thing is that our adversaries have seen yesterday that NATO is so strong and so vigilant, and even more vigilant if possible since Saturday because of the situation, of course, in the Middle East. So they see and know and sense that our military are on this. We support the president in taking out that capability, as the Americans were able to do, and they're working on that, as we know. But of course, there are always downsides in the sense that you have to be sure that you defend every inch of NATO territory, as we are doing.
And a South Korean lawmaker has warned that the escalating West Asian conflict could disrupt supplies of critical materials used in semiconductor manufacturing. Now, South Korea's semiconductor industry supplies roughly 2/3 of the world's memory chips, meaning any disruption could have global implications for electronics from smartphones to automobiles.
The US-Israel war with Iran could disrupt supplies of key semiconductor manufacturing materials. That was according to a South Korean lawmaker on Thursday. South Korea's chip industry supplies around 2/3 of global memory chips. Kim Young-bae said there is a concern that a prolonged conflict will lead to higher energy costs and prices, adding that he'd met with executives from companies such as Samsung Electronics and trade groups. He gave helium as one material that could face disruption. Helium is essential for heat management during semiconductor production. It's only produced in a handful of countries, with Qatar among the leading players in the industry. The warnings come as chip makers grapple with severe supply bottlenecks. That's due to surging chip demand from AI data center operations that's tightened supplies to many other industries, including smartphones, laptops and cars. South Korean chipmaker SK Hynix said in a statement it has a diverse supply chain for helium and that there's, quote, almost no chance that the company will be affected. Samsung declined to comment. Taiwan's TSMC said in a statement that it did not anticipate any significant impact currently and will continue monitoring the situation closely.
Meanwhile, India's aviation sector is facing major disruption as the escalating West Asia conflict forces airlines to cancel hundreds of flights. Indian carriers cancelled as many as 281 international flights on March 5th as tensions involving the United States, Israel and Iran triggered widespread airspace closures across the region. The Civil Aviation Ministry said it is closely monitoring the evolving situation in West Asia, which has impacted flight operations. In a post on X, the ministry said passengers should regularly check their flight status and remain attentive to updates from airlines through their registered contact details. Now, to assist stranded passengers, the government has activated a Passenger Assistance Control Room, or PACR. Authorities said 1,461 passenger grievances have already been addressed through the Air Seva platform, social media channels and dedicated helplines in coordination with airlines and other stakeholders. Airport officials also confirmed that at least 170 international flights were cancelled at Mumbai, Delhi and Bengaluru airports due to the crisis. However, the airspace over Saudi Arabia and Oman remaining open, Air India and Air India Express have resumed services to Jeddah and Muscat and are operating additional special flights to Dubai, Muscat and Ras Al Khaimah. Now, despite that, several routes remain suspended, with Air India Group halting operations to multiple West Asian destinations until March 10th. Now, analysts warn the disruption could hit Indian airlines particularly hard as West Asia remains a critical hub linking air travel between Europe, Asia and other global destinations. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi held a telephonic conversation with French President Emmanuel Macron on March 5th to discuss the rapidly evolving situation in West Asia as tensions continue to escalate across the region. Following the call, Prime Minister Modi said both leaders stressed the urgent need for a return to dialogue and diplomacy to restore peace and stability. In a post on X, the Prime Minister said he spoke with his friend Macron and that the two leaders agreed to remain closely engaged on efforts aimed at easing the crisis. Now, amid the widening conflict, Prime Minister Modi has also spoken with multiple regional leaders, reiterating the need to respect sovereignty and calling for an immediate return to dialogue while ensuring the safety of the Indian community in the region. And with that, we will slip into a very short break. But coming up on the other side, we'll bring you all the action from Dalal Street as markets have just opened a few minutes ago, and bring you also the stocks in news, especially with the latest coming in on India likely to now purchase Russian oil. That and more on the other side of the break. You're watching Morning Brief at 9 right here on News 9.
इन्होंने हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस नहीं लिया और हॉस्पिटल्स के लाखों के बिल चुकाने में अपनी सारी सेविंग्स गवा दी। और इन्होंने पॉलिसी बाजार से हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस लिया, जेब से एक भी पैसा खर्च नहीं हुआ और पॉलिसी बाजार ने कैशलेस क्लेम दिलवाने में इनको पूरा सपोर्ट किया। तो रिस्क मत लो, पॉलिसी बाजार से 1 करोड़ का हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस सिर्फ 525 रुपए महीने से शुरू।
Birla Opus Paints.
पढ़ता है, खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया।
This isn't a trail of peace. This is pressure overload. A hill built for 1,000, forced to carry lakhs.
Instead of lightening the footprint, you have allowed people to actually get into every nook and corner of the Himalayas.
Careless travel, choking hills. If we don't change now, there won't be much left to enjoy.
We need to follow the Bhutan model, regulate people who can access hills.
News 9 presents Heal the Hills, continuous coverage.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9 right here on News 9. Time now to take a look at the stock markets when it just opened about 5 minutes ago, and it seems like a gap down opening for the Indian stock markets yet again. Remember, yesterday we saw some rally. In fact, the Sensex closed about 1,000 points up, but this morning again the mood seems to be shifting back to some pessimism, with the Sensex now once again below that 80,000 level, opening more than 0.5% down. In fact, as we speak, it is down about 0.7% or so. So Sensex now almost on the 79,500 odd levels, while the Nifty 50 also well below that 24,700 mark. In fact, closer now to 24,600. India VIX, meanwhile, the volatility index, which has been high this entire week, remember it touched the levels of 22, followed by about 19 yesterday. India VIX is up now to levels of about 18.42. Not great news really for markets. The small cap is absolutely flat this morning, but the mid cap 100 performing slightly better, however, in the red as compared to Nifty 50 and the Sensex. Let's pull up the Nifty 50 heat map and try and see which are the sectors which are leading the pain this morning. And barring energy stocks and tech stocks, it seems like a sea of red. In fact, big news coming in for Reliance. Good news that the 30-day waiver has been issued by the United States for Indian refiners, including Reliance Industries, to buy Russian oil for a period of 30 days until April 3rd. That is pushing the Reliance stock really up this morning, up about 1% or so already. Meanwhile, some positive cues coming from the US market are also pushing up the IT stocks. But beyond that, pessimism in the Indian markets continues to be ripe. Let's bring this all into perspective with Amit Kumar Gupta, founder of Fintrek Capital, who's joining us this morning. Thank you so much for your time. Amit, just help us understand, of course, first, this, the statement that came from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent this morning, that India has been allowed to use his term a 30-day waiver to buy Russian oil. Good news overall for energy markets and the supply of critical fuel here in India, but also good news for Reliance Industries and the oil marketing companies, isn't it?
Yeah, hi Karthik, good morning. Thank you for having me. Yes, I think that sort of takes away a little bit of a fear that what will happen if the war is prolonged beyond 30 days. So India can stock up, Reliance can stock up. And given the sharp hike in the oil prices and the refining cracks that has sort of led to a decline in the auto fuel margins, it should help all the OMCs and the manufacturers like Reliance. So overall, I think a good positive. And also we are sort of into a state election season where 5 states are going into the elections. So that also takes away, any political compulsion to increase excise duty, etc., in the near term at least.
So that is the news really coming in as far as India's oil supplies go. But then there is also this sort of fear as far as the price of oil is concerned. So yesterday the Brent had hit a high of about 5% from the previous day's close, closing about $85 a barrel. But this morning again we've seen some correction in global oil prices. Now, despite Russian oil sort of opening up once again for India, are oil marketing companies still going to worry a little bit, given that overall globally the oil prices have risen considerably in the last 6 days or so, and the deep discounts that Russia used to offer are unlikely to come our way?
So firstly, I think, both oil and gas are a bit of a problem at this point of time. Obviously, the war has hurled the whole sector into sort of a crisis mode as attacks from both the sides have escalated. So I'm not worried just about the crude. It's a worry on the gas side as well. As far as the crude is concerned, I think even US does not want higher oil prices. So if you look at the commentary which is coming from the White House, from Trump specifically, the intention is that this crisis should not be escalated and the oil price remains within the limits. In any case, most of the exporters are hedged for at least 3 to 6 months ahead. So it should not be that much of a problem until unless crude stays above $85, $90 for a very, very sustainable period for at least 2 to 3 months. It's a kind of a short-term jolt where, if the things get resolved, we'll have the lower crude prices again. So it's not that much of a worry as of today.
Not that much of a worry today, but of course, BPCL, IOCL, HPCL pretty much all reacting negatively to the spike in crude oil prices. Meanwhile, talk to us about the gas story. Is it pretty much, the same theory when it comes to gas? Because India has been dependent on Qatar for its gas supply. And now we are seeing that Petronet LNG has invoked force majeure. So is that something which is likely to hurt India's gas supply? Because GAIL is also reportedly cutting down on its gas supply. So is this story, the gas story, also likely to linger on for some time?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a larger worry than the oil because of the supply from the landmark Ras Laffan LNG liquefaction plant of the Qatar LNG that is now under force majeure. And what we have seen is that spot LNG and diesel cracks, they've also doubled in the last week from about $25 to $30 to $40 per barrel. So insurance coverage again is affected. Freight rates have also jumped, and almost 50% of the imports are impacted. That's why you see the companies like GAIL and Gujarat Gas, they've informed their industrial customers to cut down on the supply and do not exceed the limits. I think once things get resolved, then also it will take probably another 2 to 3 weeks for the supply to be normalized because there are some damages to the pipelines, etc. So once that is done, then we can have a more better idea how much it is impacted. But in the short term, I think all the LNG utilization will fall at least by 30-40%, especially if the Qatar disruptions last for more than a month.
Right, and of course there were also, some action on Twitter yesterday on, in fact, X as it's called now, Amit, where Amitabh Kant, the former Sherpa of G20 and the former CEO of Niti Aayog, also really pushing and making a case for India to switch over to alternate energy, electric energy, renewable energy. Is this really a time for that rethink? And is that something that India can quickly scale up? I understand that maybe the immediate few weeks, few months may not be the schedule, but is this conflict in West Asia a clear signal for India to actually reduce its dependence on, on global supplies for energy and really build its own solar farms, wind farms, and how long and how much investments before that can become a reality? And what does that really mean for companies which are in the business of clean energy?
So, the clean energy, changing from oils to clean energy, that process has been on for quite a few years. We already are reaching close to 200 gigawatt target. And we are making steady progress on that year on year. So I don't think that's an issue that has been in the work. But what these kind of incidents actually tell us that we should actually accelerate that process of going green, have more dependence upon solar, wind, nuclear even. So there have been signs in nuclear. You have this Shanti bill now passed on, which would accelerate the nuclear reactor constructions, both in wind and solar. We are seeing a lot of action happening on the ground in the last few years. But these kind of incidents, put a sort of a nail in the coffin that we should actually accelerate at 2x, 3x speed of what is currently happening. Because, currently we have 30 days of supply. If this war goes on for long, We'll have imports from Russia, etc. But it's always a hanging sword on India's CAD and India's imports happening.
Absolutely. And of course, the depreciating rupee not really adding, any help to the affairs globally. But again, we saw RBI very aggressively trying to contain the depreciation of the rupee. Meanwhile, I want to shift focus now to interglobe aviation, again with flight schedules in, disrupted. Indian aviation companies really disrupted with the tensions in West Asia. What is your view on interglobe? Because this stock also, if I'm not mistaken, has tanked, give or take, about 10% over the last 5 or 6 trading sessions. We saw a little bit of a rise yesterday, but then again in trade this morning, Indigo is down about 2.5% or so. The long-term sort of fundamentals for Indigo seem all right, Amit. So is this pretty much, the time to buy the dips and accumulate the stock, or do you think it still comes with certain sort of red flags that one needs to be wary of?
Right. I think, long-term story remains fine, but in the short term, there have been issues. There was an issue in December as well. Now this Middle East things have happened, which has curtailed a lot of flights within which are going from Central Asia. Even in fact, the Middle East is actually a one-stop point towards going to Europe. So that sort of gets impacted. The new routes takes time to come. There is a regulatory process, so 3 to 6 months usually it takes. Indigo can increase their flights to Southeast Asia, etc. But this business, which will be lost in this particular quarter due to the tensions in the Middle East, I don't think that's coming back in a hurry. At least it will take 6 months, because a lot of these Central Asia destinations have their peak tourism period during February, March, April. So that will definitely get impacted. From May to probably August till August, it's very hot. So, although tourism also does not really happen. So it's basically a 6-month block which is happening for Indigo towards the flights in Central Asia. Plus, obviously the crude staying higher also impacts them. The rupee depreciation also does not help them. So the margins will definitely be impacted in.
All right. So likely impact on margins as far as, of course, multiple variables, tourism, fuel prices, and of course, its own sort of rostering issues that we saw in December. Hopefully, they should not come back, but a lot of variables really to look at the Indigo story. I want to also talk about defense stocks, but first up, I want to begin in specific with Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, HAL. And yesterday, again, news came in of another Su-30 crash in Assam. Amit, this company has pretty much, not really delivered on the wish list that the Indian Armed Forces had of HAL, whether it was first the 2 Tejas crashes and then a third Tejas brake failure, not the kind of recalls that one expects from military aircraft assembly lines. And yesterday again, a Su-30 Mk1 reportedly built by HAL crashed in Assam. Overall, HAL has not really had a sailing year, so to speak, all of last year and even into 2026. But all defense manufacturing stocks during the time of war continue to remain high. In fact, we are seeing HAL is up despite that yesterday's news of the crash, up about 1.5%, 1.6% as we speak. And even Bharat Electronics is up about 2% or so. How do you see India's sort of Make in India defense pack performing, and specifically on HAL? Again, are there red flags on non-delivery and faulty delivery of its services?
So as a disclosure, we don't have any positions in HAL or BEL. Neither we have a coverage on these stocks as of now. We are on the outlook of initiating some positions in defense, but I think we are still 3 to 6 months away from that. My sense is that as a general comment, these things does not help the global export picture too much. I think domestically, we are still okay, but if these incidents keeps on happening, then that sort of dents the image of the overall defense picture. I'm sure that when Defense Ministry will look into it and proper steps will be taken to mitigate this impact. As far as the general defense companies, I think that's a reaction of what is happening in the Middle East.
Okay.
So a lot of, in any case, India is expected to increase their defense expenditure over the next decade. So I think that's also a gradual process, probably 10 to 12% increase every year. So that should benefit defense companies in the long run. But one needs to also understand that the order books are very long in nature, 5 to 10 years kind of a cycle. And valuations needs to be in line for making any investment decisions.
All right. And of course, I can't let you go without talking about IT stocks, tech stocks, again, the kind of volatility we've seen in the entire IT space and mostly in the red side. But this morning, I think taking cues from what's happening in the US NASDAQ space, we are seeing at least some improvement. In fact, some buying activity in tech stocks this morning. We have had this conversation earlier, but, have things changed in the last few days ever since, let's say, the India AI Impact Summit, ever since Anthropic sort of, autonomous systems being used in war and then sort of delisted by the US Pentagon? Are we seeing some sort of movement, especially when it comes to TCS making those large investment decisions in data centers? Are we seeing some sort of a pivot in the business model of tech stocks? And for the long term, are these stocks to really buy, accumulate at this point? Because they had once been blue chip companies, but we haven't really seen them live up to the kind of expectations, the kind of hype that AI created, especially for Indian services.
So, the traditional IT services model is under pressure as AI automates a lot of repetitive, high volume tasks, which were once handled by all the junior engineers. So Gen AI delivers material productivity gains in testing, documentation, legacy migration, raising client expectations for cost savings, especially during the renewals period of the agreements. So in a low growth environment, IT services companies are increasingly compelled to accept that aggressive pricing, which would mean that the terminal growth assumptions gets trimmed. That is also reflected in the valuations which they are currently trading in after this decline in the index of almost 30% on the IT index. So my sense is this is not going to get resolved very quickly, at least not in 2026. The traditional, pyramid of AI agents reducing the billable volumes, that needs to be seen how aggressive that can be. So my sense is that it's a wait and watch as far as IT services industry is concerned for this particular year, as the terminal growth assumptions are not really estimable as such. So we have to see, stock by stock, how the companies are adapting to this new environment. Valuations are in favor, but there is no reason why they cannot go down from here. It's a more of a underweight kind of a position for us. We are not looking to really buy into IT or increase our weightage.
All right. So just help us sort of, drill this down for the retail investor. Let's say you have been a long-term investor in India's IT story, and over the last few years, for as long as you've been invested, the returns that you're seeing to date are pretty much in line with the benchmark indices. Then is it the right time to exit your position, or should you still hold on since you have the long-term mentality and continue and hope for things to improve?
No, see, again, that's a very investor-specific decision. So, depends on what buy levels you have, initiated in these stocks. But my only concern is that the pace at which the new services scale will happen and the legacy work will get declined. That is the biggest unknown. So whether it can fall another 20% and an investor can take that 20% hit on its current portfolio, something which is down already maybe 20-30%, that's a very investor specific decisions and depends on the risk appetite. My sense is that there will be not major returns from 1st February when the new Anthropic AI models were released. Right. From 1st February, I am expecting almost negative returns for at least 2026. So there is no hurry to really buy into this. One needs to take a sort of a stock specific approach to it and see how things are unfolding. As far as the IT index is concerned, I'm expecting a negative return in 2026.
All right, negative expectations on the IT index. Before I let you go, Amit, we haven't really seen gold spike the way it usually does in the times of volatility, in the times of uncertainty and in the times of conflict. In fact, globally hovering in the range of about $5,000 to $5,100 per ounce. And here in India also, prices are range bound, 1.6 to 1.7 lakh rupees per 10 grams. Why not, why are we not seeing a kind of spike that gold usually sees at times like these?
So it did spike about $200 once the news broke out, but it is also facing a lot of liquidation pressures. A lot of people are stuck from the higher levels of January starting, January mid also. So there is a lot of position squaring and profit booking which is happening in gold. Remember, gold moved to about 5,600 and then crashed to about 4,600. So there are a lot of stuck positions also. COMEX expiry is also this month, so a lot of traders are squaring it off, and there is a sense of a liquidation at least in the global markets,
right,
where we are seeing gold, silver going down. We are seeing stocks going down. We are seeing generally except commodities like oil. Or gas, everything else is being liquidated. So it's a sort of a position shift also within the commodity space, where people are selling gold and silver and buying, other commodities like oil and base metals.
All right, Amit Kumar Gupta, thank you so much for your time. As always, pleasure having you here with us, and thank you once again for your time. And with that, we will slip into another short break, but a lot more coming up on the other side. Keep watching News 9.
झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया।
जाबाजों ने जब तिरंगा ऊंचा लहराया, मैंने उस लम्हे को और खास बनाया। देश की बेटियों ने जब हौसला दिखाया, इस लाल रंग ने उस पल को हर चेहरे पे सजाया। 100 सालों से ज्यादा का सफर रूह अफ़ज़ा के हर घूंट में समाया है, तभी तो पूरे इंडिया ने इसे दिल में बसाया है। रूह अफ़ज़ा, ड्रिंक ऑफ इंडिया।
इस खेल में खेला होगा, हर नहले पे दहला होगा, बड़ा है स्टेज, बड़ा है पूरा भारत साथ खड़ा है। Setting up the trap, kick it hard in the booth, chuck there for the ball. Chuck there for the ball. Chuck there for the ball. Chuck there for the ball.
Welcome back. On to other global stories. Now, President Donald Trump has fired Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem in a major cabinet shake-up of his second term. Now, Trump dismissed Noem as head of the Department of Homeland Security, the agency leading his immigration crackdown. Now, in a post on Truth Social, the president said Republican Senator Markwayne Mullin of Oklahoma will take over the department starting March 31st. Now, the decision follows growing controversy over a large-scale immigration operation in Minnesota in which federal agents shot dead 2 U.S. citizens. Reports also say Trump was angered by Noem's testimony before Congress, where she said the president had personally approved a $220 million DHS advertising campaign that prominently featured her. And the U.S. Defense Department has formally designated Anthropic and its AI models as a supply chain risk. It is the first time such a label has been applied to a U.S. company, a designation previously reserved for firms from adversary nations like China's Huawei. The move means defense contractors must certify they are not using Anthropic's cloud AI systems in Pentagon-related work. The dispute began after the Dario Amodei-owned company refused to allow its AI technology to be used for mass surveillance or fully autonomous weapon systems. Anthropic says it will challenge the decision in court, deepening a rare public showdown between Silicon Valley and Washington. Staying with the world of artificial intelligence, Nvidia is halting production in one of its key AI chips for the Chinese market. Now, according to reports, Nvidia has stopped producing its H200 artificial intelligence chips intended for customers in China. The move comes despite the company recently receiving US government licenses to ship limited quantities of the H200 chips. Take a look.
Nvidia has reportedly stopped production of its second most advanced artificial intelligence chips, known as H200 chips, intended for the Chinese market. The Financial Times reported the update on Thursday, citing two people familiar with the situation. The report said the US chipmaker has reallocated manufacturing capacity at chip contract maker TSMC away from making H200 chips to its next generation Vera Rubin hardware. Reuters could not immediately verify the report. Nvidia and TSMC did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Last week, Nvidia said it had received licenses from the US government to ship small amounts of its H200 chips to customers in China. However, this move suggests Nvidia does not expect any meaningful H200 sales in China in the near term. In January, US President Donald Trump's administration gave a formal green light to China-bound sales of Nvidia's H200 chips, but shipments remained stalled due to guardrails built into the process.
And more news from artificial intelligence. Broadcom is signaling a massive push into the moving AI chip market. The company's shares jumped after it forecast more than $100 billion in artificial intelligence chip sales next year. The projection suggests the semiconductor giant is rapidly gaining ground in a market currently dominated by Nvidia.
Shares of Broadcom rose more than 5% Thursday morning, after the company predicted over $100 billion in AI chip sales next year, signaling rapid share gains in the market dominated by Nvidia. Big Tech's push to secure the vast computing power needed for artificial intelligence has lifted Broadcom in the data center infrastructure race, as it helps design custom processors that can serve as an alternative to Nvidia's costly chips. Analysts say the company is seeing heavy demand from clients including Meta Platforms and Anthropic, with customer commitments equivalent to the power consumption needs of more than 8 million U.S. households. That puts Broadcom closer to the scale of recent AI chip deals by Nvidia and AMD, as the rise of custom processors increasingly threatens Nvidia's stronghold in the advanced data center infrastructure market. Both Broadcom and Nvidia have seen their stocks decline so far this year, amid investor concerns around whether heavy spending on AI will generate sufficient returns to justify lofty tech valuations. CEO Hock Tan also assured investors the company was well-placed amid widespread supply shortages of memory chips and limited capacity at AI processor manufacturer TSMC.
And on the other side of the globe, China has pledged to ramp up investments in high-tech industries and scientific innovation as it seeks to strengthen its economy amid growing global tensions. Now, at the opening of the country's annual parliament on March 5th, Chinese Premier Li Qiang said boosting technology development is key to enhancing national security and reducing reliance on foreign technology. The announcement comes as China sets a lower economic growth target for the year amid intensifying rivalry with the United States.
At the opening session of China's annual parliament on Thursday, Premier Li Qiang outlined plans for the world's second-largest economy. He vowed to boost investment in high-tech industries and scientific innovation, saying they are key to strengthening national security and reducing dependence on foreign technology. The pledge comes amid rising geopolitical tensions and an intensifying rivalry with the US. Li praised China's ability to withstand Trump's tariff hikes, but said multilateralism and free trade are under severe threat.
The achievements of the past year have not come easily. We have faced rare external shocks and challenges, combined with a complex and severe domestic situation marked by intertwined and overlapping dilemmas.
Li then announced a 7% increase in the national defense budget, as well as more funds for research and development. He acknowledged an acute imbalance between strong supply and weak demand, subdued market expectations, and ongoing risks from a persistent property sector downturn and high local government debts. Those challenges have pushed Beijing to set the economic growth target for the year at 4.5 to 5%. That's a slight downgrade from last year's 5%. Analysts say the weaker growth target signals that Beijing recognizes the multi-year challenge of rebalancing its economy. China's 15th five-year plan pledges to drive an increase in household consumption as a share of economic output. It also sets new ambitions in areas where China already dominates. Despite accounting for 85% of the world's EV charging stations, it plans to double their numbers within the next 3 years. And in AI, Beijing said it will build vast, hyperscale computing clusters powered by cheap, abundant electricity.
And budget airline Wizz Air expects the financial impact from the Iran conflict to be limited to its current fiscal year ending this month. Now, speaking to Reuters, the CEO said the pressure on the airline is likely to ease from the month of April. He added that part of the recovery will come as the airline had already planned to shift more flight capacity back to Europe starting September.
Wizz Air expects to limit a financial hit from the Iran conflict to its fiscal year ending this month. Speaking to Reuters, its CEO, Joseph Varady, said he expects the pressure to ease from April, partly because the airline had already planned a move of capacity back to Europe from September. The comments are the first since Wizz flagged a $58 million hit to its net profit from the war in Iran. The crisis has sideswiped the global aviation market and pushed up oil prices. Wizz Air shares fell as much as 10% in morning trade on Thursday. The aviation sector has seen a massive sell-off this week globally. It's on fears of a protracted conflict in the Middle East. Key airport hubs have been impacted with thousands of flight cancellations. Varady said the conflict will affect about 5% of Wizz Air's capacity, some 50 flights out of 1,000 daily, adding that the firm's decision to leave its Abu Dhabi base in September meant that it was far less exposed than it otherwise would have been. The airline is allocating 60 to 70% of its Middle East capacity back to Europe, including destinations such as Italy, Spain, Greece and Albania.
And finally, from regulatory tensions to major token freezes, it's been a busy week in the crypto world. A growing divide between the United States and Britain over crypto regulation is raising fresh uncertainty for digital asset markets. Meanwhile, the stablecoin issuer Tether has frozen billions of dollars worth of tokens amid compliance concerns. Here's a roundup of the biggest crypto stories making headlines this week.
From a British-US divide on crypto regulation to billions of tokens being frozen. This is Crypto Weekly. British and US regulators are divided over how to test blockchain-based versions of financial securities. That's according to a source who said Britain's been pushing for a more cautious approach in crypto collaboration talks. It's up against a pro-crypto US under President Donald Trump, which has already eased regulation. The US and Britain announced in September a task force for both improving digital asset cooperation and reducing regulation for companies seeking to access each other's markets. Crypto exchange Kraken's banking unit is the first of its kind to secure a payments account with the Federal Reserve. The US Digital Assets Bank has access through a limited purpose account and comes as the sector deepens its reach into mainstream finance. Kraken said that through its Fed Master account, it can link directly to core US payment systems and reduce operational costs. Outflows from Iranian crypto exchanges spikes in the hours after Saturday's US and Israeli strikes on Iran. That's according to two blockchain analytics companies. which added that it was not possible to be certain of the reason behind the moves. One of the data firms said funds leaving Iranian crypto exchanges jumped sharply to hit more than $2 million in the hour after the strikes began, while the other said the outflows peak was a roughly 8-fold increase compared with the previous day at the same time. Tether said it has frozen about $4.2 billion of its crypto tokens over links to illicit activity. That's as authorities around the world try to crack down on crypto-related crime. The stablecoin company is the largest in the world and has more than $180 billion of its dollar-pegged token in circulation. It said this week alone it helped the US Justice Department freeze millions of tokens over links to so-called pig butchering, a form of fraud in which scammers form a personal relationship with their victims.
And that's all we have time for on this edition of Morning Brief at 9. Thank you so much for watching, but news continues right here on News 9 after this short break, so don't go anywhere, and thanks for watching.
नितेश श्रीवास्तव जी सिर्फ 35 साल की उम्र में अचानक एक बीमारी से चले गए। उनकी टर्म लाइफ इंश्योरेंस के पैसे बच्चों की पढ़ाई और घर खर्च में काम आ सकते हैं। पॉलिसी बाजार ने क्लेम के वक्त फैमिली का पूरा साथ दिया। पॉलिसी बाजार पे 2 करोड़ का टर्म लाइफ इंश्योरेंस सिर्फ 700 रुपए महीने से शुरू।
पढ़ता है, खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया।
What you saw me on the field and off the field is like chalk and cheese. Is leadership acquired or leaders are born?
No guts, no glory, no pain, no gain. My tendency is to go for magic, not for perfection.
I never give up. I like to win. If you believe you can, you can.
Just me being here, it's a statement.
You define a concept called against all odds. You seem to be a destiny's child. When chips are down, the whole team could have looked up to you, said, Dada is still there.
Every time, whether I scored 100 or a Sachin scored 100 or a Rahul scored 100 or a Sehwag scored 100, the scoreboard said India won.
There is a quality about me, which is why perhaps people feel I'm a perfectionist, because I don't get tired easily.
Let the kids know and the families know that one of the best ways to get a good education, go to a good school and a good college anywhere in the world, is if you play a sport well.
How would it be possible for a person, ordinary person, for me